you must reject it not because God had said it, but because this must have been interpolated later on by man, by ignorant people. So there is no, this approach is not necessary that you prove that at that stage this line was introduced later on, and in the previous versions of the Bible this line is not present, or this style of expression was not present in the earlier versions and it was introduced later on. The present approach of the Western scholars is exactly this. The approach of the Holy Quran is not this. It says that it is impossible for God to contradict His creation, because He is the one creator who is also the master of the world. So there has to be a perfect unison between in His universe, whether it is the religious universe, spiritual universe, or the material universe. This is what is said in Surah Mulk, for instance. تبارك الذي بيده الملك وهو على كل شيء قدير الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا وهو العزيز الغفور الذي خلق سبع سماوات طباقا ما ترى في خلق الرحمن من تفاوت فارجع البصر هل ترى من فطور ثم ارجع البصر كرتين ينقلب إليك البصر خاسئا وهو حسير. I leave the translation of the first part, but the directly relevant part is the second bit. It says that God has created heavens in 7 spheres, and you won't find any contradiction in the creation of God. Search for it, look for it, anywhere you please, and you won't find any contradiction. Repeat this, try again. Your sight will return to you tired and haggard and defeated. Yet it would not find any contradiction in the creation of God. So the Holy Quran or the other books of the holy books, according to this statement, because they are word of God and there can't be any contradiction between anything which comes from God. So whenever there is a contradiction between the word of God and the other word of God, or the word of God on the one hand and the creation of God on the other hand, then that contradiction is a handiwork of man and could not be the word of God. So this is our attitude to the not only to the biblical statements, but also to the other statements of other religious books as well. And our criterion would be, as a questioner asked me, how would we know that this is from God and that is not from God? If there is no contradiction in statements, that would be from God. There is no doubt about it, because it means people have not taken interest enough in that to change it to suit their requirements or their imaginations. And if there are contradictions, either both of them should be rejected, or at least one would be held to be true and the other be rejected. And for that, the criterion for a Muslim adopts is that if one of the two statements of the Bible which appear to be contradictory to each other agrees with the statement of the Holy Quran and the other does not, then we know that this must be true, because the Holy Quran, we believe, is the same book intact. So if statements are made like, that for instance it was a real snake which walked into heaven and talked to Adam and so on and so forth, because it is against the facts of nature, either we will reject or we will agree with the Christian scholars that it must have carried a message and the language must have been a figurative language, and And if we find the meaning behind it, and that meaning is consistent with the concept of religion, then we won't reject it as interpolation or literal either. Then you know that here a figure of speech is used. But where there is no possibility of any reconciliation between a statement in the manner that we can call it a figure of speech and done away with it, then we'll have to admit naturally that this part is an interpolation and unfortunately we can't agree with it. So just generalization won't do. You'll have to examine a particular piece which is in question and see it from all these angles which I have just mentioned. Please.
Referring to the Bible, recently I was looking through 2 Chronicles of Muslim Marvel, referred to a contradiction, referring to a king whose name I've forgotten, but he had a son. He couldn't have that age at the time.
Yes.
He was apparently born before his father.
Quite.
Absolutely impossible.
Quite.
And he was a younger son as well.
Yes.
And that was virtually impossible.
Correct.
What happened was that recently I've been reading the New Standard American Bible.
I see.
And instead of the age that is given in all the, and that was the date of that, I think, published date, that was the 1960s, around the 1960s. And before that, the age of the king, the son, when he was born, that when he became king, was roughly about 42. It was 42. It was 42. And in the Standard American Bible, that's been replaced blatantly by 22. Just blatantly. No other alteration at all.
Yes.
So I'm just bringing that point up.
That you better write a short note on that for review of religion, for the review of religions. So it can be pointed out to the Christian world that you shouldn't do this now, I mean, before public eye at least. You have no right to do this. Unless they prove their point by saying that the later day version which we inherited from some previous generations was wrong because it was not a true translation of the previous version in some other language and so on and so forth. Sometimes they succeed in doing it, then of course we will rectify our position. And you say that we based this claim of contradiction in that particular book on some translations made by Christian scholars. Now when you have proved that that translation was wrong, we withdraw our objection. But in this case, this is a wrong way. If there is an objection raised against it, nobody has a right to amend the word of God to suit the requirements of a particular time. This is the wrong attitude. So you better write to them as well as write to the review of religion about it. And now what was it you wanted to ask this young boy? Yes, please. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. By the way, who are you? Would you introduce yourself, please? You are the son of? Mr. Muhammad Siddiq of, from where? Hounslow, yes.
Grandson of Maulid Tahir.
That's right, now I understand, yes. He is staying here temporarily, he is coming from Saudi Arabia. You are coming from Saudi Arabia, aren't you?
Yeah.
No, I thought you are the maternal, you are the son of his daughter, not of his son. Understand? He is your Maulid side is your maternal uncle, not paternal uncle, but maternal grandfather, not paternal grandfather. Is that right? Right, yes. Yes, of course your name is Mubashir, not Siddiq. Yes, I should have understood it, yes. Please.
When I'm about to preach, I try and change people's religion to a Muslim. What should I do when I can change my religion?
I couldn't follow this, this garble. Please.
When I'm about to preach, I try and change people's religion to a Muslim. What should I do when I can never change my religion?
कोई anybody assist me please?